Good evening, and welcome back to SleepWise. Tonight, we're going to learn something gentle and surprisingly comforting. Why human behavior so often follows the same familiar patterns, even when we swear we'll do it differently next time. Before we begin, if these stories help you unwind, please follow the show and share it with someone you care about so more tired minds can find a softer landing at the end of the day. Imagine you're in a quiet room with the lights turned low, and on the table in front of you sits a simple model of a mind not made of wires or metal, but of three calm layers that rest on top of one another like blankets. The first layer is old, older than cities and calendars, older than written language, and it lives in the body as much as in the brain. This is your biology, the fast systems that notice threat, lean toward comfort, remember pain, and search for reward. Because for most of our story as a species, those instincts kept us alive long enough to see another sunrise. The second layer is social, and it arrives the moment you imagine another person watching you. It's the part of you that cares about belonging, reputation, and status, that listens for approval in a tone of voice, and that quietly asks, again and again, am I safe with these people? The third layer is incentives, which sounds like money, but is really anything that makes a behavior easier, harder, rewarded, or punished. Incentives can be obvious, like a deadline or a bonus, but they can also be invisible, like the relief you feel when you avoid an awkward conversation, or the tiny comfort of putting something off until tomorrow. When we look at behavior through these three lenses, biology, social structure, and incentives, so much of what feels like personal weakness starts to look like a predictable response to being human. Over the course of this episode, we'll drift through a handful of everyday behaviors, the kind that follow us into meetings, into relationships, into late nights with a glowing screen. And each time, we'll move slowly, first noticing the feeling of the behavior, then tracing it back to the body, the social world around it, and the rewards and pressures that keep it in place. For now, just let your shoulders drop a little and take a small breath that feels easy. You don't have to fix yourself tonight. You only have to understand softly how you were shaped. As we go, you may notice a quiet kindness appear, because explanation often melts judgment, the way warm water loosens a tight knot. We'll begin with procrastination, that strange delay that shows up even when the task is small, and we'll treat it not as laziness, but as a meeting point between discomfort, attention, and the promise of immediate relief. As we settle in, let's let the word procrastination become smaller and softer than it usually feels. Most of the time, procrastination is described like a flaw in character, a lack of discipline, a bad habit that proves you are not trying hard enough. But tonight, we'll treat it differently, as a very common human strategy for dealing with discomfort, especially the quiet discomfort that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. Picture a simple task waiting for you, something ordinary like replying to a message, starting a document, or making an appointment. You know it will take only a few minutes, and yet your hand hesitates, and your mind offers you a dozen tiny detours instead. Maybe you tidy a corner of the room. Maybe you scroll for just a second. Maybe you open the task, then close it, then promise yourself you'll come back when you feel more ready. Inside that hesitation is usually a feeling, not laziness, but a small pinch of uncertainty, or the fear of doing it poorly, or the dull weight of starting. The mind has a gentle preference for what is certain, simple, and immediately soothing, and it will often choose a small comfort now over a larger reward later. So procrastination often begins as a kind of emotional bargain. You trade a little progress for a little relief, and relief is powerful because it arrives fast, like cool water on warm skin. If you've ever delayed something and felt your chest loosen for a moment, that is the core of the loop. The task stays where it is, but the discomfort of facing it steps back just enough to let you breathe. It's also why procrastination is often worse at night, when your mental energy is lower and your tolerance for friction is thin. By then, you have spent the day making decisions, absorbing information, adjusting your tone, holding small responsibilities in place. The mind, tired and practical, looks for the easiest path through the next few minutes, and easy paths tend to be the ones that offer immediate reward, even if the reward is simply the absence of tension. Tonight, we'll keep this tone of kindness. We'll look at procrastination as a meeting point between your biology, your social world, and the incentives shaping the moment. And as we do, you may notice how the behavior makes sense, even if it still costs you something. Sometimes the task is not even hard. It is simply undefined. A blank page, an unanswered email, a form with too many boxes, anything that asks you to choose a first step can feel like standing at the edge of fog. In fog, the brain slows down because moving forward without clear visibility once carried risk. So it pauses, and it searches for a safer, clearer, smaller thing to do, something with a quick finish and a tidy sense of completion. Now let's look at the first shaping force, the biological layer, the older wiring that still hums beneath modern life. A human brain is not designed to maximize productivity. It is designed to conserve energy, avoid danger, and learn quickly from what hurts. Starting a task often carries a tiny cost in all three categories. It costs energy because you must focus, hold steps in mind, and push through the first awkward minutes of beginning. It can feel like danger, not physical danger, but social or emotional risk, because many tasks are connected to judgment, uncertainty, and the possibility of failure. And it can hurt in a small way, because effort has a texture, and the body notices that texture as strain. So the brain naturally scans for an easier option. This is where the idea of present bias fits in, though we don't need the formal term to feel it. A reward that is immediate is weighted more heavily than a reward that is distant, even if the distant reward is larger. In the language of survival, a berry in the hand beats a harvest next month. Another part of the biology is the way emotion and memory tag certain tasks. If you've had a bad experience before, being criticized, making a mistake, feeling embarrassed, your nervous system learns to treat similar situations with caution. It doesn't always do this with words. Sometimes it does it with a quiet heaviness in the stomach, or a slight tightening in the throat, or a sudden desire to do anything else. Procrastination can be the nervous system's attempt to avoid that feeling, not because you are weak, but because your body is trying to protect you from a state it remembers as unpleasant. And then there is attention, which behaves like a flashlight with limited battery. When the battery is full, you can point it where you want. When the battery is low, the beam is drawn to brighter, louder, simpler things. This is one reason procrastination loves the evening. It arrives when your attention is already spent, and it offers you softer, easier stimulation. A quick check, a small snack, a tiny task with an immediate finish. Each one gives a short signal of safety and completion. Biology also prefers clear endpoints. A task with a crisp finish, wash the cup, fold the shirt, gives the brain a clean reward. A task without a clear finish, write the report, plan the future, does not. So the brain drifts toward what it can complete, because completion is a kind of nourishment. As we keep going, notice how gentle this is. The same system that helps you learn, conserve energy, and stay connected can also pull you away from the things you mean to do. It is not a moral failure. It is a set of ancient settings meeting modern demands. And once you see the pattern, it feels less personal. Now we add the second layer, the social world, the invisible audience that lives in the mind even when the room is empty. Many tasks are not just tasks. They are signals. A presentation is not only information, it is competence. A message is not only words, it is tone, timing, and belonging. A piece of work is not only output, it is a small statement about your place in a group. So, when you delay, you may actually be delaying a moment of evaluation. Even if no one is watching right now, the brain can imagine the future glance, the future comment, the future silence. In older human life, being judged poorly could mean losing trust, losing status, or losing support. Those risks were not abstract. They affected food, shelter, and safety. So the nervous system treats social evaluation with real seriousness, the way it treats storms and cliffs. This is why procrastination often clusters around tasks that can be seen by others. You may notice that you can easily clean your kitchen, but you stall on sending an email, because the email can be read and interpreted. You may start a small chore, but delay sharing your work, because sharing makes it real, and real invites response. Social structures also create a certain kind of perfectionism. In many environments, mistakes feel expensive. A small error can feel like a mark, and a mark can feel like a story people tell about you. So the mind tries to protect you by waiting until you feel ready, until the words are perfect, until you are certain. But certainty is rare, so waiting becomes a loop. There is another social ingredient, softer and quieter. We often procrastinate when a task feels misaligned with identity. If you believe you are not the kind of person who does this, or you worry that doing it will reveal something about you, you may delay simply to avoid the feeling of mismatch. This can happen with studying, exercising, apologizing, asking for help. The task touches something tender, and procrastination becomes a polite way of stepping around it. Even social support can shape the pattern. When you have accountability, a partner, a class, a team, the task gains a shared rhythm, a sense of being carried. When you are alone, the task can feel like a private mountain. So the social layer can either lighten effort or make it heavier, depending on the shape of the environment. Tonight, we're not trying to fix the mountain. We're simply noticing how often procrastination is really about relationship, to people, to reputation, and to self. Modern life also adds invisible timers, a seen notification, a fast-moving group chat, an inbox that never truly empties, can make delay feel like you are falling behind the pace of others. And when you feel behind, the mind sometimes avoids the whole field, because stepping in would confirm the gap. Now the third layer, incentives, the quiet forces that make a behavior easier or harder, rewarded or punished, often without announcing themselves. When you procrastinate, you usually gain something immediately. You gain relief. You gain a moment of comfort, a softer emotion, a small return to safety. That immediate payoff is an incentive, and it is stronger than most people realize, because it is fast, reliable, and available on demand. Meanwhile, the reward for doing the task is often delayed. Finish the document, and the reward may come later in a calmer future week, or in a compliment you might never hear, or in a stress you simply avoid. Delayed rewards are real, but they are quieter. So the mind leans toward the loud reward in the present. Incentives also live in the environment as friction. If starting the task requires 10 steps, finding a file, opening a tab, remembering a password, the mind feels the drag and turns away. But if procrastination requires only one step, pick up the phone, click a video, it becomes the smoother road. This is why behavior is often less about willpower and more about pathways. The path of least resistance wins more nights than we like to admit. There is also the incentive of ambiguity. When you are unsure what good looks like, each step can feel risky. So the mind chooses the incentive of certainty instead. Something clear, something finite, something you know how to finish. A quick message, a small chore, a familiar scroll. Even guilt can act as a strange incentive. Sometimes we delay, and then we punish ourselves with tension. And that tension feels like effort, like payment, like proof that we care. In a quiet way, guilt can become a substitute for action because it creates the sensation of doing something without requiring the vulnerability of beginning. So the loop continues: discomfort, delay, relief, guilt, and then more discomfort. Tonight, we are simply holding the loop in open hands. If you recognize yourself in it, you don't need to judge. You can just notice where the incentives are strongest, where the friction is highest, and where your nervous system is trying to stay comfortable. In the next few moments, we'll take this one behavior and turn it like a small stone in lamplight, seeing how tiny changes in context can soften the pattern, not through force, but through gentleness and design. Sometimes the most helpful thought is simply this: procrastination is a form of seeking safety. The mind is saying, not yet, the way it might say, not in the cold, or not when the ground is slippery. And once you hear it as a safety signal, you can respond with calm curiosity, asking what would make the first step feel smaller, warmer, and more certain. Now we drift into a second behavior, one that can appear even on the calmest days: social comparison. Picture a neutral moment that should feel simple. You're waiting for an elevator, stirring tea, walking through a hallway, or letting your eyes rest on the quiet glow of a screen. And then, without asking permission, your mind notices someone else. Their confidence, their achievements, their ease, their appearance, their seeming progress through life. And a small inner scoreboard wakes up. It doesn't always speak in full sentences. Sometimes it arrives as a sensation, a dip in the stomach, a tightening in the ribs, a subtle thought of, am I doing enough? Sometimes it comes as a brief lift. At least I'm ahead here, followed by a strange emptiness, because winning a private contest doesn't always bring peace. Social comparison is rarely pure envy or pure pride. It is usually a restless checking, like tapping a compass to see which way the needle swings. Where am I? How am I doing? Do I still belong? In small doses, comparison can feel harmless, even useful. It can point you toward what you admire. It can help you learn the way a student learns by watching a skilled teacher. But comparison has a shadow side, especially when it becomes constant, when the mind checks so often that it can't fully return to itself. Modern life makes that constant checking easier. In earlier times, you compared yourself to a village. Now you can compare yourself to an endless river of faces, achievements, bodies, homes, trips, opinions, and carefully edited moments. It's like being asked to take a test that never ends, with a scoreboard that keeps refreshing. And because you never see the full truth of other lives, the comparison can feel unfair. You compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. You compare your private doubts to someone else's public certainty. Yet the mind continues not because you are shallow, but because it is trying to answer an old question. Am I safe in the group? Am I valued? Am I at risk of being left behind? Tonight, we won't fight the mind for asking. We'll simply understand why it asks. We'll take the same three lenses and hold them up to this behavior slowly. First, the biological layer. Why the brain is tuned to rank and belonging. Then, the social layer. How cultures decide what counts as up and down. Then, the incentives. The tiny rewards that make comparison repeat. For now, just notice the moment the scoreboard turns on. A thought that begins with they and ends with me. And then, like a slow exhale, we turn to the body beneath it. It can even happen with people you love, where admiration and insecurity sit side by side, and the mind quietly counts what it thinks it lacks. From the biological perspective, social comparison begins with a simple truth. Humans are group animals. For most of our story, being accepted by a group was not a preference, it was protection. Groups shared food, warmth, knowledge, and care. So the brain developed strong sensitivity to belonging because belonging predicted safety. This is why praise can feel warm in the chest and rejection can feel like pain. It is not only metaphorical. The nervous system reacts as if a door is closing, as if the fire is moving farther away. Comparison is one of the brain's ways of checking that door. It scans the social landscape the way eyes scan a horizon. Who is strong? Who is admired? Who is listened to? Who is protected? And where am I relative to them? This scanning helps with learning too. When you see someone do something well, your mind absorbs a model. It says, softly, that is possible, and it nudges you toward skills and behaviors that might help you thrive. In that sense, comparison can be adaptive, like a quiet map of the terrain. But the same mechanism can become sharp when resources feel limited. Scarcity makes rank feel urgent. When time feels scarce, opportunity feels scarce, attention feels scarce, the brain tightens and comparison becomes more frequent, more intense. Because in older environments, scarcity was dangerous. It meant hunger, exposure, loss. And in scarcity, knowing your place in the group mattered even more. There is also memory. The brain remembers social pain with a special kind of clarity, as if to say, avoid that cliff again, a moment of being laughed at, a time you were overlooked, a time you tried and felt small. Even years later, a mild comparison can awaken an echo of those moments, not as a story, but as a body feeling. So you might think you're comparing salaries or looks or achievements, but underneath, the nervous system is comparing safety. Am I at risk? Am I secure? Do I still fit? Biology does not ask whether the comparison is fair. It asks whether the comparison might keep you safe. And because the brain is designed to notice patterns, it will keep collecting social data, even when the data makes you restless. And there are chemicals involved, the quiet messengers of the body. A social threat can raise stress responses, just as a physical threat can, because the brain uses the same alarm systems. A sense of approval can bring ease and warmth, because safety lets the body loosen. So comparison can literally change your breath, your posture, your heart rate in small ways you may not notice until you pause. Tonight, let that restlessness be understood. It is ancient wiring doing its job a little too loudly in a modern world. In the next lens, we'll see how society hands the brain a measuring stick, and how that measuring stick changes from place to place, even from room to room. Now we add the social layer, the world of norms and status, the invisible rules that tell the brain what counts as success. Social structures give comparison its measuring stick. They decide what is praised, what is mocked, what is rewarded, and what is ignored. In one environment, calmness is status. In another, ambition. In another, wealth, beauty, speed, certainty, or constant productivity. So even if biology only asks, "Where do I stand?" society answers, "Stand here and stand like this." We learn these answers early, long before we can name them. We notice who gets attention. We notice which voices are taken seriously. We notice which people are forgiven quickly and which people are punished for small mistakes. Slowly, the mind builds a map of social value. That map becomes the background for comparison. It is why you can feel confident in one room and anxious in another. It is why you can feel content alone and unsettled the moment you step into a crowd. Because the crowd carries standards even when no one says them out loud. Families create standards too. So do schools, workplaces, neighborhoods, friend groups, and cultures. Some standards are gentle and generous. Others are narrow. And when standards are narrow, comparison becomes painful, because it turns human variety into a single ladder. You are either climbing or falling. But most lives are not ladders. They are landscapes with seasons, detours, pauses, and hidden work that no one sees. Modern platforms intensify this ladder feeling. They make status visible in numbers: likes, views, badges, follower counts, job titles, rankings, top lists. Numbers feel objective even when they measure only one slice of value. And once numbers appear, the mind compares faster. It becomes a reflex. Another social structure is the story of timing. By a certain age, you should have this. By now, you should have figured that out. These stories can be completely different across cultures, and yet inside one community, they can feel like law. So you compare your timeline to someone else's timeline, forgetting that people begin from different starting lines with different burdens, different luck, different support. And there is the quietest structure of all, the fear of being left out, not left out of a party, but left out of belonging, left out of respect, left out of warmth. So the mind checks, am I still acceptable here? Do I still fit? Do I still matter? Tonight, we're not trying to erase comparison. We're simply noticing that the comparison is not born in isolation. It grows in a garden of standards. And when you see the garden, you can stop blaming the seed. Next, we turn to incentives, the third layer, where comparison becomes a habit because it offers quick information and quick feelings in a world that rarely sits still. Incentives are the quiet engines that keep comparison running even when it steals your peace. Comparison offers quick information, or at least the feeling of information. It gives the mind a fast answer to a hard question. Am I okay? And even if the answer is uncomfortable, the brain often prefers certainty to ambiguity, because uncertainty keeps the nervous system awake. So, comparison becomes a way to reduce uncertainty, like checking the weather. There are also incentives built into modern environments. When a system constantly shows you what others are doing, achieving, buying, traveling, celebrating, it creates endless reference points. It makes comparison effortless. One swipe, one glance, one refresh, and effortlessness is a reward because it lowers friction. Comparison can feel motivating too. You see someone's progress, and your mind says, I should work harder. That surge can be real. It can feel like a gust pushing a sail. But a gust is not the same as calm wind. Over time, motivation powered by comparison often turns into restlessness because there is always someone ahead on some metric. So the incentive is mixed, a burst of energy followed by a slow drain. And because the burst arrives first, the mind repeats the behavior. Platforms and workplaces also reward visibility. When people are praised for being on top of things, for responding quickly, the mind learns that checking is a form of safety. You check to avoid missing out, to avoid falling behind, to avoid the small social cost of not knowing. Even outside of screens, comparison is rewarded in subtle ways. Rankings, reviews, best of lists. These systems turn human variety into a score, and scores invite checking. So here is the gentle reframe. Social comparison is not proof that you are petty. It is proof that your brain is social and your environment is full of signals. The comparison becomes painful when the measuring stick is constant, loud, and unkind. Tonight, imagine turning down the volume on the scoreboard, not smashing it, not arguing with it, just lowering the sound as if the room is dimming, because the goal isn't to be above or below. The goal is to be present in your own life, at your own pace, in your own season. And now we step toward a modern behavior that sits right beside comparison, feeding it and feeding on it. The small, familiar urge to check your phone, not because you're weak, but because attention, like water, flows toward the easiest channel. The next behavior is modern, familiar, and strangely gentle on the surface. Phone checking. It often begins with something tiny, almost nothing, a flicker of curiosity, a soft itch of restlessness, a sense that your mind wants to be elsewhere for a moment. You can be mid-sentence in a book, mid-sip of water, mid-thought with your eyes half closed, and still your attention leans toward that nearby rectangle as if it has its own gravity. Sometimes there is a clear trigger, a buzz or a flash, and the body reacts before the mind has time to vote. But often there is no trigger at all, only a thin feeling of something might be happening, and the phone becomes the quickest way to close that open loop. You pick it up almost tenderly, like checking a window for weather. A quick glance becomes a tap, then another, then a scroll that lasts longer than you meant, until you look up and realize time has moved without you, as if it quietly walked out of the room. What's strange is that the content is rarely nourishing. It's fragments, headlines, half-jokes, tiny dramas, little bursts of novelty that vanish the moment you consume them, like sparks that light and disappear. Yet the loop repeats, because the reward is not the information itself. The reward is the shift in feeling. A brief lift from boredom, a small relief from discomfort, a sense of connection when you feel alone, a feeling of certainty when your mind is carrying too many loose threads. Phone checking can also be a socially acceptable pause button. When a conversation is awkward, you check. When a task feels heavy, you check. When you don't know what to do next, you check. It offers a momentary step sideways, a quick exit from the pressure of being fully present. And at night, when your energy is thin, that glow can feel like a tiny campfire. Warm, immediate, asking almost nothing from you. Tonight, we won't treat this as a moral problem. We'll treat it as a predictable pattern shaped by the same three forces we've been using all along. Biology, the ancient wiring that loves novelty and closure. Social structure, the invisible expectations of responsiveness and belonging. Incentives, the design of quick rewards and low friction. So, as you imagine the phone resting somewhere nearby, let it become just an object again, not a villain, not a weakness, simply a bright doorway the brain has learned to walk through whenever it wants a quick change in state. And now we'll look beneath that doorway at the older systems that make a small glowing screen feel to the nervous system like something worth turning toward. Biology gives the phone its power by giving novelty its power. The human brain is built to notice change, because change once carried meaning. A rustle in the grass could be food, danger, or another person. A new sound could be a warning, and paying attention quickly could keep the story going. So the nervous system developed a sensitivity to the new and it rewards you for detecting it. That reward is not always joy. Sometimes it's simply a sharpening of attention, a brightening of the mind, a small feeling of being awake. This is why the phone is so effective when you are tired. It offers micro novelties, tiny updates, tiny surprises, tiny shifts in stimulus, and your brain responds as if it has found fresh berries on a familiar path. There is also the biology of uncertainty. A brain dislikes not knowing because not knowing used to be risky. Open questions keep the nervous system alert, like a door left slightly open in the wind. So, if you wonder, did they reply? Or what's happening? Or did I miss something? Your body may treat that question like a loose thread it needs to pull. The phone promises a fast answer. Then there is learning. If you check your phone and sometimes find something rewarding, a kind message, a funny clip, a useful update, the brain starts to predict reward from the act of checking itself. And the strongest kind of reinforcement is not predictable. It's intermittent. Sometimes you get the reward, sometimes you don't. That unpredictability trains the brain to keep trying because the next check might be the one that pays off. This is an old learning system, and it is incredibly efficient. It's the same logic that makes just one more refresh feel convincing. The phone also becomes linked to relief. If you check when you feel bored and boredom fades, the brain learns that checking is an escape hatch. If you check when you feel anxious and anxiety softens, the brain learns that checking is a quick sedative. If you check when you feel lonely and you see signs of people, the brain learns that checking is a quick form of company. Over time, the phone becomes less like a tool and more like a regulator, a small object that helps the nervous system shift states on demand. And biology is always hungry for state shifts. It wants to move from tension to ease, from dullness to stimulation, from uncertainty to closure. Add in simple sensory design, the light, the movement, the smooth scrolling, and you have a stimulus that fits the brain like a key fits a lock. None of this is about you being weak. It is about ancient learning systems meeting an object that offers quick rewards with almost no effort. And now we add the second layer, the social world, where the phone is not only novelty, but belonging, reputation, and the quiet pressure to stay in rhythm with others. The social layer turns phone checking into something heavier and softer at the same time. Heavier because it adds meaning. Softer because it offers comfort. A message is not only information. It is a small proof that you are still inside someone's awareness, still part of a living web. For a social brain, that proof can feel like warmth in the chest. But social life also adds invisible expectations. Many environments reward being reachable. They reward quick replies, quick reactions, constant availability. Even if no one demands it directly, the expectation can settle inside you like a rule. you don't remember agreeing to. And modern communication turns timing into interpretation. A quick response can signal care. A slow response can be read as distance. A seen message without a reply can become a story, and the mind knows this, so it checks. Work cultures amplify this. In some workplaces, responsiveness is treated like competence. Availability is treated like commitment. Silence can be misread. So, checking becomes a form of social insurance, a way of staying safe inside a system of expectations. The phone also acts as a shield in public spaces. It gives your eyes a place to land in elevators, hallways, cafes, waiting rooms. It offers a socially acceptable way to step out of exposure for a moment. I'm busy, the posture says, even when what you really feel is, I'm unsure where to stand. So checking can be a way of managing social discomfort, not only seeking novelty. Then there is the social layer of comparison. When you open the phone, you often open windows into other lives. Highlights, milestones, confident opinions, celebrations, bodies, homes, trips, status. Even if you don't intend to compare, your brain receives social data and begins to measure. Who is visible? Who is praised? Who seems ahead? Who seems safe? And because you rarely see the full truth behind the images, the comparison can quietly tilt your mood without you noticing the moment it happened. Loneliness also changes the pull. When you feel alone, the phone offers signs of people. Names, faces, voices, reactions, the sense that the world is still populated. Digital closeness can comfort you. It can also become the easiest kind of company, repeated whenever real closeness feels unavailable. And underneath much of it is a single social fear, dressed in modern clothes. The fear of being left behind, not left behind in distance, but in belonging. So the mind checks to stay in rhythm, to stay updated, to stay included. Seen through this lens, phone checking isn't simply distraction. It is social regulation. It is the nervous system keeping track of connection, reputation, and safety. Now we add the third layer, incentives, where design and reward make the loop feel as smooth as water, finding the easiest slope. Incentives are where this behavior becomes most clearly shaped. An incentive is anything that makes a behavior easier, more rewarding, more likely to repeat. And the phone is full of incentives that are immediate, frequent, and low effort. First, the reward arrives fast. A tap gives you something new. A scroll gives you more. A refresh offers possibility, and possibility itself is a small thrill because it keeps hope awake. Second, the cost is low. No planning, no vulnerability, no awkward pause. No risk of being wrong in the way a real conversation, a real project, or a real decision can make you feel wrong. So when the mind is tired, it chooses the low-cost door, because tired minds search for gentle exits. Third, the phone reduces friction almost perfectly. It is usually near you. It wakes instantly. It contains many worlds at once: connection, entertainment, information, distraction, comfort. So the activation energy is tiny. Compare that to other soothing activities. Reading asks for focus. Walking asks you to stand up. Journaling asks you to face your thoughts. Even making tea asks for steps and time. The phone asks for almost nothing, and it delivers a quick change of state. Notifications are incentives, too. They are small alarms that say, something needs you. They create urgency. If you respond, you receive closure. If you ignore it, you carry an open loop, and open loops can feel itchy in the mind. So the brain seeks closure again. Intermittent reward strengthens the loop even more. Sometimes you check and find something delightful. Sometimes you find nothing. That unpredictability keeps checking alive because the next check might pay off. This is one of the oldest learning patterns in the nervous system. Then there are social incentives. Feels like approval. A reply feels like connection. A view count feels like recognition. Even if you tell yourself you don't care, the nervous system still registers these as social signals, and social signals have weight. And finally, relief becomes its own reward. If you check the phone when you feel anxious and the anxiety softens, you train your nervous system. Discomfort appears, checking follows. Relief arrives, and the brain stores the pattern. Over time, the phone becomes a regulator, not because you are weak, but because the incentive structure is consistent. Easy behavior, quick reward, frequent cue. When you see this, you can stop arguing with yourself. You can recognize that you live inside an environment that makes certain loops extremely easy to repeat. And the gentlest way to change a loop is not to fight it, but to reshape the incentives, adding a little friction where you want less, and a little ease where you want more. In the next segment, we'll offer a calm reframe, not as a checklist of rules, but as a softer way of seeing the phone as a tool again. Rather than a doorway your attention walks through without you. The gentle reframe for phone checking is not stop, it's notice. Because noticing is the moment your attention becomes yours again. The goal isn't to hate the phone or turn it into a villain or build a moral story about failure. The goal is to see what the phone is doing for you in that moment. Is it giving you novelty? Is it giving you relief? Is it giving you belonging? Is it giving you certainty? If you can name what it is offering, you can choose softly whether that is what you actually want right now. Sometimes you do want it. Sometimes you want to answer someone you love, check a map, learn something useful, share a laugh. There's nothing wrong with that. What becomes tiring is the automatic drift, when the phone becomes the default answer to every small feeling. Imagine your attention as warm water in a cup. If the cup has a small crack, the water leaks out quietly, not because the water is weak, but because cracks let things slip away. Compulsive checking can be one of those cracks, a tiny habit that drains the cup across the day. The calm response is not to scold the water. It is to understand the crack. Sometimes the crack is boredom. Sometimes it is uncertainty. Sometimes it is loneliness. Sometimes it is the need to avoid a tender thought. And when you see which one it is, you can respond with something that matches the need more closely than scrolling does. A slow breath that gives your body a moment of safety. A stretch that changes state without noise. A message to one person you truly want to connect with instead of a scroll past strangers. A small ritual that returns you to your own room. This is how the three forces fit together. Biology wants novelty and relief. Social structure wants belonging and responsiveness. Incentives make the phone the easiest door. So the pull is not random. It is shaped. And once you see how it is shaped, you can soften it if you choose, not with force, but with design. A little distance can add a breath of space. A little friction can turn an impulse into a choice. For now, let the phone be just an object again, resting quietly somewhere nearby. Let your attention return to this slower pace, because the next behavior will visit sits deep in the nervous system and makes certain choices feel heavier than they should. It's the way loss can sting sharply, while gain can glow only briefly. The mind's instinct to protect what it has. This pattern is called loss aversion, and we'll approach it the same way, one calm layer at a time. Loss aversion doesn't arrive as a concept. It arrives as a sensation, quick and physical, like a hand gently closing around what you already have. Think of a small loss, something ordinary and almost harmless. A wallet misplaced for an hour, a file that vanished because it wasn't saved, a fee you didn't expect, an item that broke, a sentence you said that landed wrong. Even if the loss is minor, the body can react as if something important is at stake. There's a small drop in the stomach, a tightening in the chest, a sharp focus that snaps into place, as if the mind is suddenly all business. Now compare that to a gain of the same size, finding a little money you forgot you had, getting a pleasant message, saving a small amount of time. The good feeling is real, but it often fades faster than the sting of the loss. That imbalance is the quiet signature of this behavior. Loss tends to feel heavier than an equivalent gain feels good. And because it feels heavier, it shapes choices. You may hold onto an old object you never use because giving it away feels like losing value. You may avoid switching to a better option because changing feels like admitting the old choice was a loss. You may hesitate to try something new because the possibility of embarrassment feels larger than the possibility of learning. Even in conversation, it can appear. Admitting I was wrong can feel like losing status. Apologizing can feel like losing face. So the mind looks for ways to keep what it already holds, even when what it holds is heavy. At night, loss aversion can become replay. The mind revisits what happened, turning it like a stone in the hand. Sometimes it's learning, a practical search for how to do better. Sometimes it's self-punishment disguised as responsibility, as if pain is the price you must pay to deserve moving on. Tonight, we're not here to judge that instinct. We're here to understand it. We'll hold loss aversion up to the same three lenses. First, the biology that treats loss like danger. Then, the social layer that turns loss into meaning and identity. Then, the incentives that price losses loudly and reward gains quietly. And as we do, you may feel the sting soften, not because the loss disappears, but because you can see the machinery behind the feeling. When a pattern becomes visible, it becomes less personal. It becomes something you can watch, like a reflex, a protective motion, not a moral verdict. Now, let's begin beneath the surface, with the oldest layer first. Biologically, loss aversion is tied to survival, and survival is an old teacher. For most of human history, losing resources could be dangerous. Losing food meant hunger. Losing shelter meant exposure. Losing allies meant vulnerability. So the nervous system learned to treat loss as a louder signal than gain, because loss could end the story quickly. This is why the brain gives negative events such bright ink. One sharp mistake can imprint itself in detail. One harsh comment can echo for years. Meanwhile, a dozen gentle good moments can blur together unless you pause to hold them. It isn't fair, but it is functional. The brain would rather over-remember danger than under-remember it. A loss also wakes up the body's alarm systems. Attention narrows. The mind scans for causes and fixes. Muscles tighten slightly, as if preparing for action. Even if the loss is modern and symbolic, the body responds with ancient intensity, because the brain uses the same internal machinery. You can imagine a smoke detector. It's meant to be sensitive, even a little jumpy. A detector that chirps at burnt toast is annoying, but a detector that misses a real fire is catastrophic. Loss aversion is that sensitive setting designed to protect you. There's also the biology of learning. Pain teaches quickly. If you touch something hot once, you don't need a second lesson. So the brain tags loss with discomfort, then replays it, not to torture you, but to encode the lesson. The replay is the brain's way of saying, let's not step there again. Uncertainty makes the sting sharper. Loss often comes with not knowing what happens next, how far the drop goes, how long recovery takes. Uncertainty keeps the nervous system awake. So the mind clings to what it already has, because what it already has is known, and known things feel safer. This is why keeping can feel calmer than changing. even when changing would actually reduce risk. Keeping is familiar. Keeping feels measurable. Keeping lets the shoulders drop, and the body often chooses what lets the shoulders drop. So, when you notice yourself protecting what you have, even fiercely, remember that this is not mere stubbornness. It is a protective system doing its job. A system tuned to prevent the floor from dropping out. Once you recognize that, you can meet it with kindness instead of criticism. Because criticism adds threat, and threat makes the grip tighter. Now we add the social layer, where loss becomes more than resources. It becomes reputation, identity, and belonging. Social structures can turn a simple loss into a story about who you are. In a group, loss is rarely private. People notice what you achieve, what you miss, what you gain, what you lose, what you keep, and what you let go. Even when no one is judging, the mind imagines judgment because belonging matters, and judgment feels like a threat to belonging. A mistake at work can feel like losing competence. An awkward moment can feel like losing dignity. A rejection can feel like losing love. A setback can feel like losing your place. And when loss touches your place, it becomes heavier than the event itself. Different environments decide which losses are most painful. In some places, losing time is treated like the great sin. In others, losing face. In others, losing certainty or appearing inexperienced or admitting you don't know. So, your mind learns what is dangerous to lose in your world, and it guards those things carefully. Social comparison also adds weight. When you see others gaining, your own lack can feel like loss, even if nothing was taken from you. If a peer is praised, you may feel you lost recognition. If someone else advances, you may feel you lost ground. The brain treats relative position as a resource, and resources trigger protection. Shame plays a role here. Shame imagines an audience and says, "This loss means I am less." Because shame is painful, the mind tries to prevent it by avoiding situations where loss could be visible. So you might play it safe. You might stay quiet in a meeting. You might delay submitting work until it feels perfect. You might avoid trying the thing you want to try because trying creates a chance of being seen failing. This is how loss aversion can quietly shrink a life, not through laziness, but through protection. Yet, social life can also soften loss. In supportive groups, mistakes are treated as learning. Belonging stays steady even when outcomes wobble. When a group continues to accept you after you slip, your nervous system learns that losing one thing does not mean losing the circle. That lesson is powerful. It loosens the grip. It makes risk feel possible again. Tonight, just notice how much of loss is meaning. The event is one layer, the social story is another, and often it's the story that hurts most. Now we turn to the incentive layer, where rules, penalties, and reward structures teach the brain that losses are costly and gains can be optional. Incentives teach the mind what is expensive, and in many systems, losses are priced loudly. Penalties are often clear, immediate, and memorable. A late fee is specific. A public correction is sharp. A missed deadline has consequences. Meanwhile, doing the expected thing often earns silence because it was expected. So the brain learns a practical lesson. Avoid losses first. Gains are nice, but losses are dangerous. Financial life makes the pattern easy to see. People sometimes hold on to a losing investment too long because selling would turn a paper loss into a real one. They may avoid a reasonable risk even when the odds favor them because the pain of a possible loss feels larger than the pleasure of a likely gain. They may cling to an old subscription, an old device, an old plan simply because changing would require admitting the old choice cost something. But incentives exist far beyond money. In conversation, the cost of saying the wrong thing can feel higher than the reward of saying something helpful, so silence wins. At work, the cost of a visible mistake can feel higher than the reward of a bold idea, so caution wins. In relationships, the cost of an awkward talk can feel higher than the reward of clarity, so avoidance wins. These are incentive structures even when no one calls them that. And incentives love certainty. A smaller, sure outcome can feel better than a bigger, uncertain one, not because it is logically superior, but because certainty lets the body relax. That relaxation is a reward in itself. It is a nervous system dividend. So the mind tilts toward not losing, because not losing often comes with immediate bodily relief. There's also an incentive hidden inside mental replay. Replay can feel like work. It can feel like you are paying attention, taking responsibility, becoming wiser. So the mind returns to the loss again and again because the act of replay creates the sensation of doing something. But sensation is not the same as resolution. Sometimes the kindest move is to notice when replay has stopped being learning and started being self-punishment. Incentives can be reshaped. That's not a command, just a truth. When penalties are softened, when experimentation is normalized, when feedback is safe, the nervous system loosens and risk becomes less expensive. And when rewards are made visible, when small wins are noticed and allowed to land, gains begin to register more fully. You don't have to do any of that tonight. Tonight, you're simply learning how the loop is built. Because once you can see the structure, the feeling becomes less mysterious. And now we'll offer a gentle reframe, the kind that lets the mind keep its protective instinct without letting protection become a cage. The gentle reframe for loss aversion is not to become reckless. It is to become aware of the scale your mind is using. Often, the nervous system places a heavy weight on what could be lost and a lighter weight on what could be gained. That is the old setting. So a small uncertainty can feel enormous, A small possibility of embarrassment can feel like a cliff. A small chance of failure can feel like proof that you should not begin. But awareness changes the scale. It doesn't erase the feeling, it simply creates space around it. You can say softly, "My brain is protecting me," and in that sentence, there is kindness. There is also honesty, because protection is the purpose. Once you name it, you can ask a calmer question. What is the actual loss here? Sometimes the loss is real and worth avoiding. But sometimes the loss is an image, a story about how you must appear, a story about how you must be perfect, a story about how one mistake would define you. Those are costly stories, and they can be revised. Another gentle move is to let gains linger. The brain registers gains quickly and then moves on. So you can slow it down. When something goes right, even something small, you can let it land in the body for a few breaths. Not as forced positivity, just as accurate accounting. A small success deserves to be real, not evaporate instantly. And you can remember that learning requires losses. Every skill is built on awkward beginnings. Every calm confidence is built on moments that didn't go perfectly. If loss aversion is the nervous system trying to prevent pain, then growth is the nervous system learning that pain can be tolerated and that belonging can remain. As we drift onward, we'll meet another protective pattern closely related to this one. It's the instinct to move with the group, to choose what others choose, to follow the current because the current feels safe. This next behavior is conformity. And as always, we'll look at it through the same three lenses: biology, social structure, and incentives, until it becomes not something to be ashamed of, but something to be understood. For now, let your shoulders soften. Let the body know it doesn't have to guard so tightly in this moment. You are safe here, and the story is moving slowly. Conformity often feels so normal that we don't recognize it as a behavior at all. It can look like agreement, politeness, going with the flow, or simply not wanting to make things awkward. Picture a room with other people in it, a meeting table, a dinner, a group chat, a family gathering, a corridor where conversations float and fade. Someone offers an opinion, and you sense almost instantly where the group's current is moving. You feel it in small cues: the tone of laughter, the quick nods, the silence after a certain point, the way some ideas land easily while others fall flat. And inside you, a quiet calculation begins. If I agree, I stay in rhythm. If I disagree, I create friction. So you soften your words, or you keep your question to yourself, or you tilt your face into a polite expression that says, "Yes, that makes sense," even when part of you isn't sure. Sometimes you conform by speaking. Sometimes you conform by staying silent. Sometimes you conform by laughing at the joke you didn't find funny, because the laughter is already rolling through the room like a wave. and the wave is easier to join than to resist. Conformity can be gentle. It can be how groups coordinate, how friendships feel smooth, how people avoid needless conflict. But it can also be the way true thoughts get swallowed, the way innovation is delayed, the way someone leaves a room feeling a little less like themselves. Most of the time, the choice happens quickly, without drama. You don't stand at a crossroads and announce, "I will conform." You simply feel your body prefer the path that keeps you safe. That safety can be social, not physical, but the nervous system treats it as real. Because in a social species, being out of step with the group once carried genuine risk. Tonight, we're not here to judge conformity. We're here to understand it, and understanding is often the beginning of gentleness. We'll hold this behavior up to the same three lenses. First, biology, the ancient wiring that favors belonging and safety in numbers. Then, social structure, the norms and hierarchies that make some opinions feel safer than others. Then, incentives, the rewards for fitting in and the penalties for standing apart. For now, just notice how subtle conformity is. It often isn't a big betrayal of yourself. It's a dozen tiny adjustments, so small you barely feel them. A softened sentence, a delayed message, a moment of silence, a smile that appears before you decide. And now, slowly, we'll look beneath those tiny adjustments at the older systems that made fitting in a form of survival. Notice, too, that conformity can feel invisible because it often wears the mask of being easy. The easy laugh, the easy agreement, the easy silence. As you listen, become gently curious about your own moments of agreement. Which ones are true harmony and which ones are self-protection? Biology gives conformity its deep pull because biology cares about safety. And for a social animal, safety often looks like the group. Long before modern offices and group chats, humans lived in small bands where cooperation mattered. If you were rejected, you lost more than feelings. You lost warmth, food sharing, protection, and the calm certainty of being watched over when you slept. So the nervous system developed a strong sensitivity to signals of inclusion. Approval feels warm. Disapproval can feel like pain. Not metaphorical pain, but real discomfort that tightens the body and sharpens attention because social rejection once predicted danger. This is why the body often reacts before the mind can explain. You sense disagreement in a room and your stomach tightens, even if no one is being rude. You consider saying something unpopular and your heart rate rises slightly as if you're stepping toward a cliff. That reaction is not weakness. It is old wiring doing its job. There is also the biology of uncertainty. When the group agrees on something, even if the agreement is wrong, it creates a feeling of certainty. Certainty calms the nervous system. So the brain can prefer the comfort of shared belief over the discomfort of standing alone with doubt. In that way, conformity can be a form of emotional regulation. It reduces ambiguity. It reduces the risk of social conflict. It lets the body stay softer. And then there is the simple fact of mimicry. Humans naturally mirror one another. We match posture, pace, tone of voice, laughter. Mirroring helps groups coordinate. It creates a sense of we, and we is calming. So when a group begins to move in one direction, your body wants to move with it, often before you've thought it through. Of course, this wiring can misfire. The same systems that keep you aligned with your community can also pull you into silence when you should speak, or agreement when you should question. But the first step is to recognize what the system is trying to do. It is trying to keep you connected. It is trying to keep you inside the circle. And the circle, to the nervous system, is shelter. Tonight, let that be understood. Conformity is not only a social habit. It is a biological comfort. The feeling of being surrounded by similar minds, moving together. Now we add the second layer. The social structures that tell you which kinds of conformity are rewarded and which kinds of difference are punished. Another small biological detail is that the brain treats isolation as alarm. Even brief exclusion can raise vigilance because alone can feel like less protected. So it makes sense that your body leans toward the group even when you know you are safe. Social structures decide what fitting in means. They create the rules of the room. In one environment, fitting in means being agreeable. In another, it means being confident. In another, it means being quiet, or being sharp, or being fast, or always sounding certain. So when you enter a group, your mind begins to read the invisible handbook. Who speaks first? Who interrupts? Who is listened to? Who gets laughed with and who gets laughed at? Who is forgiven for mistakes and who is corrected publicly? These details teach you, without words, what is safe to say. They also teach you what is dangerous. Sometimes conformity is simply politeness, a way to keep harmony. But sometimes conformity is compliance with a hierarchy. If one voice has more power, others learn to shape themselves around it. They nod more. They question less. They offer ideas carefully, like placing something fragile on a table. This isn't always sinister. It can be a normal feature of groups. But it matters because it means conformity is not evenly distributed. The people with less power often conform more because the penalties for being out of step are higher. Culture plays a role too. Some cultures prize consensus and harmony, treating disagreement as disrespect. Others prize debate, treating disagreement as engagement. But even in debate cultures, there are still hidden boundaries. Topics that are safe, topics that are risky, jokes that are allowed, jokes that are not. So every group has a fence line, even if the fence is invisible. And social structure includes belonging. Humans form identities around groups, family, nationality, profession, friend circles, online communities. Once a group identity becomes part of you, conformity can feel like loyalty. To disagree can feel like betrayal, even when the disagreement is thoughtful. So people silence themselves not because they lack courage, but because they don't want to lose their tribe. Modern life adds another layer of visibility. Opinions can be recorded, screenshotted, forwarded. A single sentence can travel farther than you intended. So the social cost of being different can feel larger because difference can become permanent evidence. This pushes people toward safer, more conforming expressions. It also creates the habit of watching for cues before speaking. Where is the room leaning? Which answer is safe? Which answer will be rewarded? So conformity becomes a kind of social navigation, like walking through a city by reading subtle signs. Tonight, we're not trying to dismantle social life. We're simply noticing that conformity is often a rational response to the structures around you. And now, we add the third layer, incentives, where rewards and penalties turn fitting in into the path of least resistance. Incentives make conformity feel easy. They do this by attaching small rewards to alignment and small penalties to difference. Sometimes the reward is obvious: praise, promotion, inclusion in the next meeting, a warm tone from someone important, an invitation, a like. Sometimes the reward is simply the absence of discomfort. No awkward silence, no raised eyebrow, no tension in the air. An absence of discomfort is a powerful reward because it lets the nervous system relax. Penalties can be just as subtle: a joke that doesn't land, a comment that is ignored, a slight change in someone's expression, a slower reply, a social circle that closes slightly, like a door not fully shut, but not fully open either. These small penalties teach the brain quickly. They say, stay in the lane. In workplaces, incentives can be built into evaluation. If the culture rewards certainty, people learn to sound certain. If the culture rewards speed, people learn to respond quickly. If the culture rewards agreement, people learn to agree. Conformity becomes a career skill, not because people are fake, but because the system prices difference. Online incentives amplify this. Platforms reward content that fits the norms of the community. Shared opinions, familiar jokes, the right tone. And because reward comes quickly, the mind learns which version of itself performs best. Over time, it can feel safer to be the rewarded version than the honest version. Even friendship groups have incentives. Belonging is a reward. Laughter is a reward. Being in on it is a reward. So people may conform to avoid losing warmth, because warmth matters. Now, here is the gentle reframe. Conformity is not always bad. It is often the glue of cooperation. It keeps groups coordinated. It reduces unnecessary conflict. But when conformity asks you to abandon your true signal, your real question, your real boundary, your real observation, it becomes costly. The key is not to eliminate conformity. The key is to notice when it is serving connection and when it is serving fear. Sometimes the smallest act of nonconformity is simply to pause before you mirror, to let one breath pass before you nod, to ask one quiet question, to say, "I'm not sure," which is a brave sentence because it refuses the incentive to sound certain. And sometimes the kindest form of conformity is choosing peace, choosing harmony, choosing softness. Because not every difference needs to become a battle. Tonight, we are learning the difference between harmony and self-erasure. In the next behavior, we'll look at another common pattern shaped by the same forces. People-pleasing, the difficulty of saying no, and the way the nervous system treats conflict like danger. For now, let this understanding settle like a blanket. Fitting in is not a flaw, it is a strategy. And strategies can be softened once you can see them clearly. People-pleasing can look from the outside like kindness. It can look like being easy to work with, being considerate, being the person who keeps the air smooth and the room calm. But inside, it often feels like something else, a quiet tension in the body. Whenever you sense that someone might be disappointed in you, picture a simple moment. A message arrives asking for a favor, and you feel a small pinch before you even read the details. A colleague adds, "Just one more thing," and your chest tightens, not because you can't do it, but because you can already feel the weight of saying no. A friend suggests a plan you don't want, and you smile while your mind races ahead, rehearsing explanations, hoping to find a way to decline without creating discomfort. So, you say yes, or you say sure, or no problem, or of course, even when part of you is tired or stretched or quietly resentful. People-pleasing isn't always dramatic. It can be a series of tiny agreements, tiny accommodations, tiny self-edits, so small they feel harmless in the moment. You answer quickly. You soften your opinion. You take responsibility for emotions that aren't yours. You apologize for things that don't need apology. You volunteer for the extra task. You stay in the conversation longer than you want because leaving feels like rejection. And often you do it while telling yourself you're being good, that you're being mature, that you're being helpful. But later, when the room is quiet again, you may notice a different feeling beneath the surface. A dull anger, a tiredness that doesn't match the day, a sense that your life is being shaped by other people's requests more than your own choices. This pattern is especially common for people who are sensitive to harmony, not because they're weak, but because their nervous system reads conflict as danger. So, the easiest way to stay safe is to keep everyone else comfortable. Tonight, we're not going to insult that instinct. We're going to understand it. We'll look at people-pleasing through the same three lenses: biology, the body's response to threat and rejection; social structure, the rules of politeness, gender, hierarchy, culture, and status; incentives, the rewards for being agreeable and the penalties for being difficult. And then we'll offer a gentle reframe. Not a speech about boundaries, not a list of rules. Just a softer way of seeing the behavior as a strategy. A strategy that once protected belonging and can be adjusted once it's seen clearly. For now, notice the exact moment your yes forms. Often it forms before you decide, like a reflex. And reflexes have history. They were trained. So we begin where training begins, in the body. As you listen, you might remember moments when you meant to choose yourself, but chose peace instead. That choice makes sense. Tonight, we're simply learning how it was built. Our biology makes people-pleasing feel urgent because biology is built to protect belonging. For a social species, belonging isn't just pleasant, it is safety. Long before modern life, being accepted by your group meant warmth, food sharing, protection, and care when you were sick. So, the nervous system developed strong sensitivity to social signals. A warm tone of voice can relax you. A disappointed look can tighten you. A hint of irritation can make your heart speed up, even if you tell yourself it's not a big deal. This is why saying no can feel physical. It can feel like stepping toward a cliff because the body is bracing for rejection. And the body doesn't always distinguish between a real threat and a social threat. It uses many of the same alarm systems. Conflict, especially, can trigger those systems. Raised voices, sharp pauses, tension in the air. These can activate the stress response, narrowing attention and preparing you to appease, escape, or freeze. People-pleasing often lives inside the appease response. When the nervous system senses danger, it can choose fighting, fleeing, freezing, or fawning. Fawning is the body's attempt to make the threat go away by becoming agreeable, pleasant, useful, unthreatening. It's not manipulation. It's protection. It says, if I keep you happy, I'll be safe. There is also the biology of prediction. Your brain tries to forecast outcomes. If past experiences taught you that disagreement leads to punishment, coldness, anger, withdrawal, your brain predicts those outcomes quickly and tries to prevent them. So your body may feel anxious before you've even formed your opinion out loud. And then there's the cost of uncertainty. If you say no, you don't fully know what happens next. Will they be upset? Will they think less of you? Will they retaliate? Uncertainty keeps the nervous system awake, so it prefers the path that closes uncertainty fastest. Saying yes closes the loop. It ends the immediate tension. It gives a quick feeling of relief. That relief is not small. It's the nervous system exhaling. So the body learns, yes equals safety. Over time, the word yes becomes automatic. It arrives before you ask yourself what you want, because the body is trying to prevent danger before danger fully appears. This is why people-pleasing can persist even when you intellectually know you're allowed to set limits. Your intellect may be calm. Your nervous system may still be bracing. Tonight, let that be acknowledged. If saying no feels hard, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means your body has learned that harmony keeps you safe. Now we add the social layer because society, culture, and hierarchy decide who is allowed to say no and what the consequences look like. So, when you feel the urge to smooth things over, you're not being dramatic. You're feeling an alarm that is real to your body, even if it's small. Social structures turn people-pleasing from a private habit into a role you perform. Every group has rules about what is polite, who speaks first, who interrupts, who carries emotional labor, who smooths tension when it rises. And many people learn early that their place in the group depends on being easy. Easy to talk to, easy to manage, easy to rely on. In families, this can form quietly. A child learns that peace in the home depends on staying agreeable. They learn to read moods, to anticipate needs, to adjust their tone, to become the calm one. In some homes, praise is given for being good, which can subtly mean being low maintenance. And if anger is unpredictable, appeasement becomes a skill. In workplaces, hierarchy adds pressure. When someone above you asks for something, the cost of refusing can feel higher. Even if they wouldn't punish you, the structure itself makes you cautious. You don't want to be seen as difficult. You don't want to be remembered as the person who pushes back. So you comply, even when your time is already full. Culture shapes this, too. Some cultures treat direct refusal as rude. Others value directness but still punish it in certain contexts, especially from certain people. Gender expectations often play a quiet role as well. Many people are socialized to be accommodating, to be pleasant, to keep harmony, to take care of feelings. And when you've been praised for being agreeable, you may fear that boundaries will make you less lovable. Status matters too. People with more status can sometimes say no with fewer consequences. People with less status often feel they must earn safety by being helpful. So, people-pleasing can be a rational strategy inside unequal systems. Not because you lack backbone, but because the environment prices disagreement. There is also the social story of niceness. Niceness is often treated as morality, so refusing can feel like being bad, even when refusing is simply being honest. You might confuse boundaries with cruelty because you've seen boundaries used harshly. So you avoid them, and you keep the room smooth, and you keep your own needs quiet. And then, over time, the social role becomes internal. You become the person who says yes. You become the person who handles it. You become the person who doesn't make waves. That identity can be comforting because it brings belonging. But it can also be exhausting because it asks you to disappear in small ways. Tonight, we're not attacking kindness. We're separating kindness from self-erasure. And to do that, we need the third lens, incentives, the rewards that keep yes automatic and the subtle penalties that make no feel expensive. And when you've played that role for a long time, the idea of changing it can feel like stepping out without a map. We'll keep it gentle and keep it slow. Incentives keep people-pleasing alive because the rewards arrive immediately and the costs arrive later. When you say yes, you often get a quick payoff. Relief. The tension in the room dissolves. The conversation moves on. The other person seems satisfied. You avoid awkwardness, and avoiding awkwardness feels like safety. That immediate relief is a powerful reward. It teaches the nervous system again and again that agreement equals calm. Meanwhile, the cost of saying yes often arrives later. Later, you are overbooked. Later, you are resentful. Later, you are tired. Later, you realize you committed to something you didn't want. Delayed costs are quieter, so the brain discounts them, especially when the immediate reward is the absence of discomfort. Incentives also come as social rewards. People like agreeable people. They praise them, invite them, rely on them. You may receive appreciation, compliments, warmth, and warmth is not trivial. Warmth is one of the most soothing incentives humans can receive. Penalties, too, can be subtle. If you say no, you might get a pause, a change in tone, a little disappointment, a slight pulling back. Even if the other person is respectful, the mind can interpret these signals as danger. So the penalty doesn't have to be large to be effective. It only needs to be felt. Now, the gentle reframe is not be tougher. It's be clearer. Because clarity reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is what your nervous system struggles with most. A boundary spoken calmly can actually create more harmony than a yes spoken resentfully. And you can think of no as a form of honesty, not rejection. No is often simply the truth about capacity. It is the truth about time. It is the truth about energy. It is the truth about what matters. There is also a softer version of no, which is not a trick, but a shape. Not I can't, but I can do this part, or I can do it later, or I need to think, or I'm not the right person. These sentences lower the social threat while still protecting your life. Tonight, we don't need to practice scripts. We only need to see the structure. Biology seeks safety. Social structure rewards agreeableness. Incentives make yes feel instantly soothing. So the loop is understandable. And once it's understandable, you can begin to choose. sometimes. One breath before the yes, one moment of checking inward, one small act of self-respect that is also, in the long run, a deeper kindness. Next, we'll move to another behavior that often sits beside people pleasing like a twin. The looping mind under uncertainty, overthinking, rumination, the search for control when the future is fog. But for now, let the body rest. You are allowed to be kind, and you are also allowed to be whole. Overthinking under uncertainty can feel like being stuck in a room with a light that won't turn off. Nothing is happening in the room, but your mind keeps pacing anyway, touching the same corners, opening the same drawers, checking the same locks, as if the next round of thought will finally produce the one perfect answer that makes the future safe. It often starts with something small, an email you haven't sent yet because you're not sure how it will be received, a decision you keep postponing because each option contains a shadow, a conversation you replay because you can't tell whether you said the right thing, a plan that has too many moving parts, so your brain keeps rearranging them, hoping order will appear. Overthinking is not the same as reflection. Reflection has movement. It arrives, it examines, it learns, and then it settles. Overthinking has looping. It circles without landing, and the body usually feels it. You might notice tightness in the jaw, a shallow breath, a pressure behind the eyes, a restless urge to check, recheck, reread, reopen. Sometimes you call it being responsible. Sometimes you call it being thorough. But often it is simply the nervous system trying to create certainty where certainty isn't available, because uncertainty has a particular texture. It feels like open space with no railing. It feels like fog. And in fog, the brain doesn't like walking forward. So it tries to build a map before it takes a step. The trouble is, the map can't be fully built because the future refuses to sit still. So the mind keeps working, and working feels like control, and control feels like safety, even when it's only the illusion of safety. Overthinking also has a strange comfort to it. Not pleasant comfort, but familiar comfort. If you keep thinking, you don't have to act. If you keep thinking, you can postpone the moment where reality answers back. Overthinking can be a waiting room where nothing can go wrong yet. And at night, when the world is quiet and the day's distractions fade, the waiting room can feel louder. The mind, finally alone with itself, starts pulling on unanswered threads. So tonight, we won't shame this. We'll understand it. We'll look at the loop through the same three lenses. Biology, the predictive brain that hates open loops. Social structure, the fear of being judged for choosing wrong. Incentives, the hidden rewards of endless thinking and the hidden costs of action. And then we'll offer a gentle reframe, not stop thinking, because that's not how minds work, but a softer way of seeing what the mind is truly trying to do when it circles. For now, simply notice whether your own mind has a favorite kind of uncertainty. Money, relationships, work, health, identity. Most people have one fog bank that appears more quickly than the others. And once you name the fog, you can begin to see the lantern your brain keeps trying to carry. Biology makes overthinking feel necessary because biology is built around prediction. Your brain is not only a library of memories, it is a forecasting machine. It scans the present and tries to guess what happens next, because for most of human history, guessing correctly was protective. If you could predict the storm, you could find shelter. If you could predict the animal's movement, you could stay alive. If you could predict a conflict in the group, you could avoid being isolated. So the nervous system developed a strong preference for certainty. And when certainty is missing, it treats that absence as a problem to solve. Uncertainty keeps the body slightly awake. It raises vigilance. It narrows attention. It encourages scanning. This is why a vague threat can feel worse than a known one. A known problem has edges. A vague problem is an open field. So the brain tries to give the open field edges by thinking. It generates scenarios. It runs simulations. It asks, what if this happens? And then, what if that happens? And then, but what if I'm missing something? This is not stupidity. It is the predictive system doing its job a little too intensely. There is also the biology of open loops, an unfinished task, an unanswered message, an unresolved conflict. These can create a low hum in the mind. The brain dislikes unfinished patterns because unfinished patterns once meant incomplete safety information. So it keeps returning to them as if to close them. At a chemical level, stress signals can reinforce the loop. When you feel uncertain, your body may produce stress responses that make the mind sharper, but less flexible. Sharp minds can be good for immediate danger, but uncertainty is often not immediate danger. It's slow danger, imagined danger, social danger. So the sharpness becomes a trap. You can think clearly in a narrow tunnel, but you can't easily step out of the tunnel. Overthinking also pairs with the body's need to avoid regret. Regret is painful. The brain remembers it vividly. So, when a decision is uncertain, the nervous system tries to prevent future regret by thinking more now, as if more thinking could guarantee a regret-free outcome. But no outcome is regret-free. Life contains surprise. So the brain keeps trying, and the effort itself becomes exhausting. And then the tiredness adds fuel. When you are tired, ambiguity feels heavier. When you are tired, you have fewer mental resources to tolerate not knowing. So the brain tries to compensate by thinking harder, which makes you more tired, which makes uncertainty heavier, which makes you think harder. A quiet spiral. Tonight, just let your biology be seen with kindness. Now we add the social layer, because many of the uncertainties that trigger overthinking aren't about storms or animals. They are about people. And being evaluated by people has always mattered. Social structure makes uncertainty feel sharper because it attaches consequences to being wrong. If you choose poorly in a social system, you may lose trust. You may lose reputation. You may lose status. You may lose belonging. Even when the consequences are mild, the nervous system treats them as meaningful. So many people don't overthink because they love thinking. They overthink because they fear the social cost of a mistake. A decision at work can become a story. A sentence in an email can be interpreted. A tone can be misread. A pause can be judged. And in environments that reward certainty, overthinking becomes a way to manufacture certainty. You polish, you rehearse, you revise. You imagine the other person's reaction and you try to preempt it, like laying sandbags before a flood. Hierarchy increases the pressure. If someone above you will evaluate the outcome, the uncertainty feels heavier. Even if they are kind, the structure itself makes your nervous system cautious. You don't want to be seen as careless. You don't want to be remembered for the wrong choice. So the mind loops because looping feels like diligence. Culture shapes this too. Some cultures treat mistakes as learning. Others treat mistakes as shame. Some families and workplaces respond to uncertainty with patience. Others respond with criticism. If you grew up in a system where mistakes were punished, your nervous system learned a lesson. Prevent mistakes by thinking more. So you became a careful mind, a mind that scans for risks, a mind that tries to anticipate moods, outcomes, and hidden expectations. Overthinking can also be a form of social caretaking. You try to predict how others will feel. You try to predict conflict. You try to predict disappointment. You try to choose the option that keeps everyone okay. In that way, overthinking can be connected to people-pleasing, not as a personality quirk, but as a strategy. If I plan enough, no one will be upset. Modern life adds visibility. Messages can be saved. Opinions can be quoted. Mistakes can be shared widely. So the mind becomes even more careful because the social memory of an era can feel long. And then social comparison returns quietly. You imagine others being decisive. You imagine others being confident. You imagine that they just know. And you conclude that your uncertainty is a flaw. But uncertainty is not a flaw. It is the natural state of any complex life. So the social layer is doing two things at once. It is making uncertainty feel dangerous, and it is making you feel alone for having it. Tonight, we remove that second part. You are not alone. Most people walk around with more uncertainty than they admit. They simply hide it behind quick answers. Now we add the third layer, incentives. Because the mind often loops not only out of fear, but because looping offers immediate rewards, subtle ones that make it easy to repeat. Incentives keep overthinking in motion because thinking can feel like doing. When you loop, you get a quick sense of effort. You get the feeling of control. You get the comfort of, I'm working on it, even if nothing changes. That feeling is a reward because it reduces guilt. It tells you you're being responsible. So the brain learns when uncertainty appears, thinking hard is the proper response. Another incentive is postponement. If you keep thinking, you delay the moment of action. And action is where consequences live. Action is where you can be judged. Action is where you can be wrong. So, overthinking becomes a waiting room, a place where you can stay busy without risking exposure. The reward is safety, even if it's temporary. Incentives also show up as friction. Often, the next real step is uncomfortable. Send the email, make the call, choose a path, and accept the trade-offs. Those steps have friction, social friction, emotional friction, the friction of uncertainty becoming real. Thinking, by comparison, is frictionless. You can do it quietly, privately, endlessly, so the mind chooses the low-friction option again and again. There is also intermittent reward here. Sometimes, after enough thinking, you do have a small breakthrough, a clearer sentence, a better plan, a new angle. That breakthrough acts like a jackpot, teaching the brain that the loop can pay off, so it keeps looping, hoping for the next payout. Even when most of the looping produces only fatigue, the occasional payout is enough to reinforce it. Now, the gentle reframe is not to banish thought. It is to recognize when thought has become a substitute for safety. If thinking is helping you move forward, it will feel like it has direction. If thinking is protecting you from uncertainty, it will feel circular. One way to sense the difference is to notice your body. Helpful thinking usually softens the body. Circular thinking usually tightens it. And tonight, rather than giving you a list of fixes, we'll offer a softer idea. Uncertainty is not a problem to eliminate. It is a condition to carry, a normal part of being alive. So, the goal is not to reach perfect certainty before acting. The goal is to act with enough clarity, and then let reality provide the remaining information. Because reality is often kinder than the mind's simulated disasters. This doesn't mean acting recklessly. It means accepting that your brain's demand for certainty is an old demand, and modern life rarely satisfies it fully. So you give your brain a compromise, a small step, a reversible step, a step that teaches. When the nervous system learns through small, safe steps, the loop loosens, and the body begins to trust that not knowing is not the same as danger. In the next behavior, we'll look at a close cousin of overthinking, the anxious energy of public speaking, where uncertainty and social evaluation meet in a single bright moment. Public speaking anxiety is one of the clearest examples of a behavior that feels modern, but is powered by very old wiring. You can be perfectly capable, perfectly prepared, and still feel your body react as if you're about to step into danger. Picture the moment just before you speak. A room, a table, a few faces, maybe many, all turned toward you. There's a small pause, like the air is waiting, and inside that pause, your nervous system begins to rise. Your mouth dries. Your heart beats faster. Your thoughts feel either too fast or suddenly blank. You become unusually aware of your hands, your voice, your posture, the place your eyes should land. It can feel as if your whole self has stepped under a bright light. What's strange is that nothing is actually attacking you. No teeth, no claws, no storm. And yet the body behaves as if it must protect you. Sometimes the fear is obvious. What if I forget? What if I sound stupid? What if they judge me? Other times, it's more wordless. A wave of heat, a trembling, a tight throat that makes swallowing feel loud. A sense that you want to escape, even though you also want to do well. In that moment, the mind can shrink into a single question. How am I coming across? And it can also widen, trying to hold everything at once. The notes, the timing, the faces, the room, the sound of your own voice. So time feels strange. A minute can feel like an hour, then vanish. Many people assume this means they lack confidence. But public speaking anxiety is not a character flaw. It is a pattern, a predictable intersection of biology, social structure, and incentives. When you stand to speak, you become visible. Visibility invites evaluation. Evaluation touches status, and status to a social animal has always mattered. Tonight, we'll treat this with calm respect. We'll start by noticing the feeling without turning it into shame. Then we'll look at the biological layer, why the body reads a room of faces like risk. Then, the social layer, how norms and hierarchies change what good speaking means, and why being watched can feel like being measured. Then the incentives, the rewards and penalties that make the moment feel high stakes, even when the topic is small. If you've ever felt your voice sound unfamiliar or heard yourself speaking as if from the outside, that can be part of the same protective response. Under stress, the brain can create a little distance, as if stepping back helps you endure the spotlight. So, if this is familiar, let the recognition be soothing. You don't have to win against the feeling, you only have to understand it. Biology makes public speaking anxiety feel intense because for most of human history, being stared at by a group was rarely neutral. In a small band of humans, attention from the group usually meant something important. It could mean you were being welcomed. It could mean you were being corrected. It could mean you had done something that needed explaining. And in the darker possibilities, it could mean you were being singled out. So the nervous system learned to treat group attention as a signal. Pay attention, this matters. That signal lives in the body as arousal. Heart rate rises to prepare action. Breath changes. Muscles tighten slightly as if they're ready to move. The mouth can dry, because the body shifts resources toward immediate survival tasks. This is the same machinery that helps you respond to danger, even if the danger is only a meeting room. There is also the biology of uncertainty. When you speak, you can't fully predict what happens next. Will people understand? Will they approve? Will they interrupt? Will you forget a point? Will you be challenged? Uncertainty keeps the nervous system awake because uncertainty once meant you needed vigilance. So your brain tries to reduce uncertainty by scanning everything at once: faces, tone, posture, reactions. But scanning consumes attention, and when attention is split, speaking can feel harder. Then there is memory. If you have ever had a moment of embarrassment in front of others, your brain remembers it vividly. It stores it as a warning. Avoid that cliff. So, when you stand to speak again, the nervous system may replay the old alarm, even if today's room is kinder. This is not irrational. It is protective learning. And because social pain can register in the brain similarly to physical pain, the body treats the possibility of humiliation as something to avoid. That's why your hands can shake even when your mind says, "I'm fine." The body is not debating ideas. It is guarding belonging. Finally, there is the biology of performance. Under stress, the brain can narrow. This narrowing is useful if you need to focus on one immediate threat. But speaking well often requires the opposite: flexibility, memory, warmth, rhythm. So stress can make you feel less like yourself, which then increases stress because you notice the change and worry it will show. A loop. Tonight, let the loop be understood. Your body is not betraying you. It is trying to keep you safe in a moment it interprets as socially significant. And once you see the biology, you can start to meet the sensation with curiosity instead of panic. Now we add the second layer, the social structures that decide what it means to be good at speaking and why being watched can feel like being measured. Social structure is the reason public speaking can feel like more than sharing information. It can feel like being judged as a person. In many environments, speaking is tied to competence and status. People assume that the confident speaker is the capable one. They assume that calm delivery equals clear thinking. They assume that a steady voice means authority. So when you speak, you're not only communicating your point, you may feel you are auditioning for respect. That audition can feel heavy, especially in places with hierarchy. If you're speaking to someone senior, the stakes feel higher. Not because they are cruel, but because the structure itself assigns weight to their opinion. A nod from them can feel like approval. A blank expression can feel like failure. So, your nervous system responds to the structure, not just the words. Culture shapes it too. Some cultures reward directness and assertiveness. Others reward humility and careful speech. Some groups prize storytelling. Others prize brevity and certainty. So the same talk can feel safe in one context and dangerous in another, because the rules of the room change, and the rules are unspoken. You learn them by watching who is praised and who is corrected. You learn them by noticing which questions are welcomed and which are treated as naive. Over time, your brain builds a map. These rooms are safe. These rooms are sharp. Modern life adds visibility. Presentations can be recorded. Slides can be forwarded. A sentence can be repeated out of context. Visibility makes mistakes feel more permanent, so the mind tightens. There is also the social fear of disruption. To speak is to take space. To take space is to risk being seen as arrogant, annoying, or attention-seeking, depending on the norms of the group. So some people feel anxious not about forgetting their points, but about the act of occupying attention at all. That's a social lesson, a lesson about who is allowed to be loud, who is allowed to lead, who is allowed to be listened to without apology. Then there is the audience itself. A friendly audience can soften the nervous system. A cold audience can sharpen it. But even a neutral audience can feel cold if your mind has learned to interpret neutrality as danger. And many of us have, because in some environments, neutrality is the first step toward criticism. So your body may search faces for reassurance, and if it doesn't find it quickly, it invents a story. They don't like me. I'm failing. That story is not always true, but it is socially plausible, so the brain believes it. Tonight, we name this so it becomes lighter. Your anxiety is not only your wiring, it is also the environment's standards and your history inside those standards. Now, we add the incentive layer, where the moment of speaking is priced with rewards and penalties that teach the nervous system to treat it as high stakes. Incentives are what turn a simple act of speaking into a moment that feels expensive. In many settings, speaking well is rewarded. You gain credibility. You gain influence. You gain opportunities. You gain the quiet comfort of being seen as competent. So the reward side is real. But incentives also include penalties, and penalties often feel louder than rewards. A stumble can invite doubt. A forgotten point can be interpreted as unpreparedness. A shaky voice can be misread as uncertainty in the ideas, even though it's only uncertainty in the body. These are social penalties, not guaranteed, but possible. And possibility is enough to wake the nervous system. There are also internal incentives. If you have a high standard for yourself, your brain treats any imperfection as costly. You may believe you must sound polished to deserve respect. You may believe you must be flawless to avoid embarrassment. So you raise the stakes yourself, not because you're vain, but because you're trying to be safe. Then there is the incentive of avoidance. If you avoid speaking, you get immediate relief. You stay quiet, and your heart settles. You let someone else talk, and the danger passes. That immediate relief is a reward, and it trains the nervous system. Silence equals safety. So the next time you have a chance to speak, your body remembers that silence worked. This is how anxiety grows. It is reinforced by avoidance, not by weakness. The gentle reframe is not to force yourself into grand speeches. It is to recognize what your nervous system is trying to do and to offer it a different kind of safety. Safety can come from predictability, knowing your first sentence. Safety can come from connection, looking for one friendly face, one anchor. Safety can come from smaller steps, speaking once in a meeting, asking one question, making one clear point, then resting. Small, repeated safe exposures teach the body a new lesson. Visibility does not always equal danger. It is also helpful to remember what public speaking really is. It is not combat. It is sharing. It is a brief moment of leadership, yes, but also a moment of service. You are helping others understand something. When you shift the frame from "I am being judged" to "I am offering," the nervous system often softens because offering is cooperative and cooperation is safe. Tonight, you don't need to practice anything. You only need to understand. Your anxiety is a strategy, a protective reflex shaped by biology, social structure, and incentives. And strategies can be adjusted once they are seen clearly. Next, we'll move toward our final synthesis, where these behaviors begin to connect and where the story becomes less about fixing yourself and more about designing a gentler world for your nervous system to live in. Habits are the quiet rails beneath your days. They don't arrive with announcements. They simply happen. Your hand reaches, your feet move, your mind starts a familiar script, and you realize you've already begun. Think of the small habits that live around you like furniture. How you make coffee or tea. How you unlock your phone. The way you check the same app without deciding to. The way you snack at a certain hour. The way you say sure before you've checked your calendar. The way you brush your teeth almost on autopilot, your body already knowing the sequence. Habits can be comforting. They reduce effort. They make life smoother. They let you glide through ordinary tasks without spending the precious fuel of attention on every tiny choice. But habits can also feel like they own you. The late-night scrolling that happens even when you promised yourself you'd stop. The procrastination that appears whenever a task feels foggy. The little avoidance moves that keep you safe in the short term and tired in the long term. What's interesting is that habits are rarely about values. They're not proof that you are good or bad. They are proof that your nervous system loves efficiency. A habit is a shortcut the brain built because the shortcut worked. It worked once, and then again, and then enough times that the brain decided it was worth storing as a loop. You can imagine a habit like a small path in grass. The first time you walk it, the grass bends. The 10th time, the path begins to appear. The 100th time, the path is obvious, and your feet find it in the dark. Most habits follow a gentle pattern, a cue, a trigger, a routine, the behavior itself, a reward, the feeling that tells the brain, yes, keep this. The cue can be a time of day, a location, a certain emotion, a certain person. The reward is often not the thing you think it is. A snack isn't always about hunger. It can be about comfort. A scroll isn't always about curiosity. It can be about relief. A yes isn't always about generosity. It can be about safety. Tonight, we'll treat habits as a neutral technology inside the brain. We'll look at them through our three lenses. Biology, how the brain saves energy by turning repeated actions into automatic loops. Social structure, how our groups normalize and shape certain habits until they feel like just who we are. Incentives, how tiny rewards and tiny frictions decide which paths deepen and which fade. And then we'll offer a gentle reframe, not a set of rules, but a softer way of working with habits, the way you might work with a garden. You don't yell at the soil. You adjust light, water, and pathways. For now, notice one small habit you have that feels automatic, not to judge it, just to see it. Because seeing is where the power begins. Biology loves habits because biology loves saving energy. Your brain is expensive to run. Even when you're resting, it uses a surprising amount of your body's fuel. So one of the brain's great talents is automation. If a behavior repeats and it reliably leads to some kind of reward, the brain tries to store it as a loop. Not because the brain is lazy, but because the brain is efficient. This is why habits can feel like they happen before you. The cue appears and the body moves. A certain time of night and your hand reaches for the phone. A certain stress in the chest and you open the fridge. A certain awkwardness in a conversation and you laugh or agree. Your conscious mind may arrive a moment later, like a passenger stepping onto a train that's already moving. A key biological ingredient is reward. The brain pays close attention to what feels better right after an action. Not always dramatically better. Even a small shift is enough. A little relief, a little stimulation, a little comfort, a little sense of control. Relief is especially powerful because relief is safety. If an action reduces a tense feeling, the nervous system tags that action as useful. So habits often form around emotional states, not only around external triggers. Another biological ingredient is repetition. Each time you repeat a loop, the path gets easier to activate. In the brain, this is partly about strengthening connections through use, like a trail in snow. The more it is walked, the clearer it becomes, and the more the next traveler naturally follows it. This is also why habits deepen when you're tired. When you're tired, your ability to override impulses is lower. Your attention fuel is thin. So the brain leans on automation more heavily because automation costs less. The night is when the old loops feel strongest, not because you are weaker at night, but because the brain is running on a quieter battery. Biology also prefers immediate rewards over delayed ones. A habit that pays you quickly is easier to keep than a habit that pays later. That's why scrolling can outcompete reading. That's why snacking can outcompete cooking. That's why avoidance can outcompete progress. The reward is near, and near rewards feel louder. And the brain doesn't need the reward to happen every time. In fact, unpredictability can strengthen the habit. Sometimes you scroll and find something delightful. Sometimes you don't. That sometimes keeps the brain checking because the next time might pay off. Intermittent reward is a strong teacher. So biologically, habits are not a sign that you lack character. They are a sign that your brain is doing what it evolved to do. Store what works, automate what repeats, and protect energy for what might be dangerous. Now we add the social layer, because the loops you inherit from your world often become your own without you noticing the handoff. Social structure shapes habits by making certain behaviors feel normal, expected, even invisible. You learn what a typical day looks like by watching others, how people greet, how quickly they respond, how they apologize or don't. In families, habits can feel like culture, and culture can feel like identity. A family might snack together at night. A family might keep busy as a way of staying safe. A family might treat rest as laziness. So everyone learns to fill every quiet moment with activity. These patterns can be loving and they can also be heavy. But either way, they become normal. Workplaces create habits too. Some workplaces reward constant availability. So checking email becomes an automatic loop. Some workplaces reward certainty. So sounding confident becomes a habit, even when you're unsure. And once a habit is rewarded socially, it becomes part of how you survive inside that system. Friend groups shape habits through rhythm. If your friends text constantly, you learn to keep your phone close. If your friends meet late, you learn to be awake late. If your group celebrates certain achievements, you learn to chase those achievements, sometimes even when you don't truly want them. Online communities make this even more intense because norms are broadcast repeatedly. You see how people speak. You see which opinions get praise. And gradually you adjust, not because you're fake, but because belonging is persuasive. Social habits also include the quiet habit of self-presentation. How you appear, how you sound, how together you seem. Many people develop habitual politeness, habitual agreement, habitual brightness, because those habits smooth social interactions. They protect belonging. And then there is the habit of comparison, the habit of measuring. If the social world around you treats life like a ladder, you can develop a habit of checking your rank without meaning to. You open a feed and your brain automatically sorts better, worse, ahead, behind. That sorting becomes a loop reinforced by the social environment. The important thing to notice tonight is this: many habits are not personal inventions. They are inherited patterns. They are the social water you've been swimming in. You may have absorbed them the way you absorbed language without needing instructions. This is why changing a habit can feel like changing a relationship. If everyone around you does something one way, doing it differently can feel like stepping out of rhythm. It can feel like refusing the group, even when you're only choosing a different path for yourself. So, when a habit is hard to change, it isn't always because the habit is strong. It can also be because the social world is supporting it quietly every day. Now we add incentives, the third lens, where habits become almost inevitable when rewards are immediate and friction is low. And then we'll offer a reframe that treats habits like design, not like destiny. Incentives decide which habits deepen and which fade. They do this through two simple levers: reward and friction. Reward is what makes the brain say, keep this. Friction is what makes the brain say, too hard. A habit with a quick reward and low friction becomes strong fast. Scrolling offers immediate novelty. Snacking offers immediate comfort. Avoidance offers immediate relief. These rewards arrive now, not later, and now is where the brain is most easily persuaded. Meanwhile, many helpful habits pay later. Exercise pays later. Deep work pays later. Sleep hygiene pays later. Honest conversations pay later. The payoff is real, but it is delayed, and delayed rewards are quiet. So the brain needs support, structure, environment, and kindness to keep them. Incentives also hide in your surroundings. If the phone is within reach, checking is easy. If healthy food is visible, choosing it is easier. If a book is on the table, reading is easier. If your shoes are by the door, walking is easier. The environment is constantly offering you paths, and your feet take the paths that feel smooth. This is why willpower is often overrated. Willpower is a limited fuel. Environment is continuous. So habits tend to follow the environment the way vines follow light. Another incentive is emotional. If a habit reduces stress, it becomes magnetic. If it increases stress, it becomes rare. So the mind repeats what soothes, even when the soothing is brief and costly later. Now, the gentle reframe. Habits are not commands. They are suggestions the brain repeats because they once worked. So, you don't need to fight your habits like enemies. You can work with them like systems. You can ask, what is the cue? What is the routine? What is the reward? And then you can change the easiest thing first, often the environment, not with perfection, with softness. If you want less scrolling, you can add a breath of friction, a charger across the room, a grayscale screen, a single app moved off the home page, not as punishment, but as a pause. If you want more calm, you can add a breath of ease, a lamp that signals wind down, a notebook ready for 2 lines, a playlist that becomes a ritual, a cup of water placed where you'll see it. The brain responds beautifully to small design changes because it was built to follow paths. Tonight, let this be comforting. You are not fixed in place. You are shaped by biology, social structure, and incentives can be reshaped gently. In the next behavior, we'll return to the social world again, to the subtle drive for status and approval, the way humans seek signals that they are valued. But for now, let the idea settle quietly. Your habits are not proof of who you are. They are simply the tracks your days have worn, and tracks can be softened one calm step at a time. Status seeking is one of those behaviors that can sound ugly when you name it directly, but feels completely ordinary. When you live it from the inside, it can look like ambition, like wanting to do well, like caring about quality, like trying to be respected. But it can also look like a quiet restlessness, the feeling that even when things are fine, they could be better, and that better would finally let you relax. Picture a simple moment of recognition. Someone praises your work, and you feel a warm lift, almost like the room got brighter. Then, just as quickly, the warmth fades, and your mind begins reaching for the next proof. Or you hear someone else being praised, and you feel a small pinch, even if you genuinely like them. Or you walk into a room and notice, without meaning to, who seems important, who seems listened to, who seems confident, who seems admired. And a tiny part of you begins arranging yourself accordingly. You speak a bit differently. You sit a bit straighter. You choose words that sound competent. You hold back a question so you don't appear naive. You smile at the right moments. You try gently to belong at a certain level. Status seeking can also be very quiet. It can be the urge to appear together, the urge to be seen as smart, calm, successful, attractive, relevant, helpful, indispensable. It can be the subtle habit of polishing your identity before you present it, like straightening a jacket you've already straightened. And it is not always vanity. Often it is safety. Because in human groups, status has always been connected to resources, influence, protection, and opportunity. So the nervous system watches status the way it watches weather. Not obsessively on purpose, but automatically, because it is trying to predict where warmth will come from. Modern life gives status many costumes: titles, salaries, followers, likes, credentials, brands, cars, neighborhoods, invitations, subtle cues of being in. But the emotional mechanism beneath them can feel the same: a desire to be valued and a fear of being overlooked. Tonight, we won't shame this behavior. We'll understand it. we'll hold it up to our three lenses: biology, the ancient wiring that tracks rank and approval; social structure, the rules of what counts as high status in a given group; incentives, the rewards and penalties that make status feel urgent even when you're already safe. And then we'll offer a gentle reframe: not stop caring, because caring is human, but a softer way of seeing status as one signal among many, not the only measure of worth. For now, just notice where status shows up in your own life, not in dramatic ways, in tiny ways. A glance, a comparison, a desire to be seen, a desire to be safe. And then we'll begin, as always, with the body beneath it. Biology makes status seeking feel natural, because biology has always cared about rank. In a social species, rank is not just pride. Rank often predicted access. Access to food, access to metas, access to protection, access to information, access to being listened to when something mattered. So the nervous system developed sensitivity to signals of status, the way it developed sensitivity to signals of danger. Not because you are shallow, but because your ancestors who ignored rank sometimes lost support. This is why approval can feel physically warm. A compliment can soften the chest. A nod can feel like shelter. A laugh at your joke can feel like being welcomed into the circle. And disapproval can feel like threat. A frown can tighten the stomach. A dismissive tone can spike your heart rate. Even mild rejection can linger in the mind, because the brain treats social pain as meaningful information. There's also the biology of attention. Attention from others is a kind of resource. When many eyes turn toward you, the nervous system becomes alert, because being seen can be good, but it can also be risky. So status seeking often has two faces: the desire to be seen as valuable and the fear of being seen as flawed. Both are tied to the same mechanism. Visibility matters. Another biological ingredient is the way the brain learns through reward. If you achieve something and receive praise, your brain stores that as a successful pathway. And because praise is social safety, it becomes a powerful reinforcer. The next time you have a chance to earn praise, your brain leans toward it, not as a moral choice, but as a learned comfort. The body also responds to hierarchy. In rooms with status differences, you may notice your voice change slightly. Your breath may shorten. Your posture may tighten. These are ancient signals, subtle preparation for social navigation. Even if you consciously respect everyone equally, your nervous system may still track who has influence, because influence can affect safety. Finally, there is the biology of scarcity. When you feel secure, status matters less. When you feel uncertain about money, belonging, stability, the future, status begins to feel more urgent, because in uncertainty, your nervous system wants assurance. And status can look like assurance, because it suggests you will be supported. So the drive for status is not random. It rises and falls with your sense of safety. Tonight, let that be comforting. You don't have to treat the drive as a flaw. You can treat it as a signal. My nervous system is seeking security. Now we add the second layer, social structure, the world that decides which kinds of status count and which signals the brain should chase. Social structure decides what status looks like, and that decision changes from group to group. In one room, status is wealth. In another, it's intelligence. In another, it's confidence. In another, it's kindness, composure, discipline, creativity, humor, beauty, spirituality, loyalty, or tradition. So, your brain doesn't only seek status in the abstract. It seeks the kind of status your environment rewards. This is why you can feel calm in one community and restless in another, because the measuring stick changes, the rules of the room change, and the nervous system is always trying to learn the rules. Social structure also includes hierarchy. Titles, seniority, credentials, social networks, family roles, cultural roles. These structures create unequal consequences. If a high-status person approves of you, the reward can feel larger. If a high-status person disapproves, the penalty can feel sharper, not because the person is inherently more valuable, but because the structure gives their opinion weight. So, status seeking often appears as impression management. You try to sound competent. You try to avoid appearing foolish. You try to be useful. You try to avoid being that person. This is not always manipulation. Often it is simply navigation. Then there is social comparison, which is status seeking's closest companion. Even if you don't want to compare, social systems invite it. They show you ladders. Who is promoted? Who is praised? Who is invited? Who is followed? Who is imitated? When ladders are visible, the mind climbs them in imagination, because imagination is where it practices safety. Modern life intensifies this. Online platforms make status quantifiable. Likes, views, follower counts, verification marks, rankings. Numbers turn social value into a scoreboard, and scoreboards make the brain check more often. Work systems can do the same thing with performance ratings, bonuses, awards, and public recognition. Even social circles do it with subtler currencies: attention, invitations, inside jokes, being in the know. Social structure also creates identity stories. If you've been praised for being the smart one, you may chase situations where you can keep being smart. If you've been praised for being the reliable one, you may keep overcommitting to preserve that identity. Status becomes tied to selfhood. So losing status can feel like losing yourself. Tonight, just notice how gentle and human this is. The social world offers you a set of mirrors, and your nervous system tries to look good in the mirrors because looking good in the mirrors has historically meant staying in the group. Now we add the third layer, incentives. where the rewards of status are immediate and the costs of chasing it often arrive quietly later. Incentives make status seeking repeat because status rewards are fast and deeply felt. A compliment lands immediately. A like lands immediately. A nod of approval lands immediately. Being chosen, being invited, being praised, being seen, these are quick signals to the nervous system. You are safe, you are valued, you are included. That feeling is not small. It can change your posture. It can soften your breath. It can brighten the mind for hours. So the brain learns to chase the signal again. The cost, however, often arrives later. Later, you feel tired from performing. Later, you feel anxious about maintaining the image. Later, you feel restless because the reward fades and you need a new dose. This is the quiet trap. The reward is immediate, the cost is delayed, and delayed costs are easy for the brain to ignore, especially when the immediate reward feels like safety. Incentives also appear as avoidance. If status protects you from being criticized, the brain may overvalue status because it reduces threat. You might chase achievement not because you love achievement, but because achievement feels like armor. You might chase recognition not because you love attention, but because attention feels like protection from being overlooked. And the strongest incentive of all is uncertainty reduction. Status seems to promise stability. If I am valued, I will be okay. If I am admired, I will be safe. If I am high status, I won't be abandoned. These promises are not always true, but they are emotionally persuasive. So here is the gentle reframe. Status is not inherently bad. It is a signal that you are seen, a signal that you have influence, a signal that you are connected. The problem is only when status becomes the only signal you trust, when it becomes the single yardstick, the single comfort, the single proof of worth. A softer way to live is to diversify your safety, to let your nervous system have more than one place to rest. Safety can come from competence, yes, but also from relationships that don't require performance. Safety can come from meaning, from values, from quiet routines that don't need applause. Safety can come from being useful in ways that aren't visible. And when you begin to notice status seeking in yourself, you can meet it with a small kindness. My nervous system is looking for reassurance. And then you can offer reassurance from somewhere deeper than the room's scoreboard. Not a dramatic speech, just a quiet truth. I am already here. I already belong to my own life, even when no one is watching. In the next behavior, we'll move toward something closely related. Why we sometimes seek comfort in spending, treating ourselves, making quick purchases to change a feeling. But for now, let the body soften. You don't have to climb tonight. You can simply rest and let the need to be seen fade into the background like city lights dimming at a distance. Now we gather the threads, not to tie them into a tight knot, but to lay them side by side, the way you might lay smooth stones on a windowsill and notice how each one catches the light. Procrastination, comparison, checking, loss aversion, conformity, people-pleasing, overthinking, public speaking anxiety, even habits and status-seeking when they appear. They can look like separate problems, but underneath, they are often the same three forces wearing different clothes. Biology is the oldest layer. It wants safety, energy conservation, relief from discomfort, and quick learning from pain. It prefers what is immediate, what is certain, what is familiar, and what reduces threat. Social structure is the middle layer. It turns belonging into a real need, not just a preference. It creates standards, hierarchies, and invisible rules about what is acceptable, impressive, embarrassing, or risky. It teaches your nervous system which rooms are safe and which rooms require armor. Incentives are the outer layer. They are the tiny rewards that arrive quickly and the tiny frictions that make some actions feel heavy. They are relief, approval, closure, and convenience. They are also penalties, silence, disapproval, awkwardness, and uncertainty. When you stack these layers, the behaviors begin to make sense. Procrastination is often biology seeking relief, social structure fearing evaluation, and incentives rewarding delay with immediate comfort. Social comparison is biology tracking belonging, social structure handing you a measuring stick, and incentives offering quick certainty in a world full of signals. Phone checking is biology craving novelty and closure, social structure craving connection, and incentives making the doorway effortless. Loss aversion is biology guarding resources, social structure guarding identity, and incentives pricing mistakes loudly. Conformity is biology seeking safety in numbers, social structure defining what's safe, and incentives rewarding alignment. People-pleasing is biology trying to avoid rejection, social structure rewarding agreeableness, and incentives rewarding yes with immediate peace. Overthinking is biology trying to predict, social structure fearing judgment, and incentives rewarding thought as a substitute for action. Public speaking anxiety is biology reading visibility as risk, social structure tying speaking to status, and incentives making the moment feel high stakes. And habits, sitting beneath everything, are simply the brain's way of turning repeated relief into a path. So, what do we do with this understanding? Not a checklist, not a project, not a demand to change, just a softer posture toward yourself. Instead of, what is wrong with me, you can ask, which layer is loud right now? Is the body asking for safety? Is the social world asking for approval? Is the environment rewarding a loop that I didn't choose on purpose? That question alone can create space. If this episode leaves you with one gentle truth, let it be this: you are not a collection of flaws. You are a collection of patterns, and patterns are shaped. They are shaped by an ancient body, a social world, and the incentives around you. When you see that, the shame begins to drain away. because shame depends on the idea that you are failing at being human. But you are being human perfectly normally inside systems that push and pull on you all day. And there is a quiet kind of freedom in that. Freedom does not always mean changing everything. Sometimes it means changing the temperature of your self-talk. It means replacing harshness with curiosity. It means noticing a loop and saying softly, of course. Of course my mind wants relief. Of course my body avoids social pain. Of course my attention drifts toward what is easiest. Of course I protect what I have. Of course I want to belong. This is not surrender. It is accuracy, and accuracy is calming. Because when the nervous system hears a true explanation, it stops fighting shadows. If you want a second gentle truth, let it be even simpler. Small changes count, not heroic changes, not perfect discipline. Small changes in incentives, a little friction where you want less of a loop, a little ease where you want more of a loop, a small environment that helps you, the way a handrail helps you quietly, without drama, a charger placed across the room, a sentence you keep ready for saying no, a first sentence you keep ready for speaking, a 5-minute step that makes beginning safer than waiting, a kind person you can anchor your eyes on in a room. These are not hacks. They are ways of telling your nervous system, I've thought about your safety, and I'm with you. And if you want a final truth, let it be the one that often arrives only at night. You don't have to solve your life to rest. You don't have to earn sleep by finishing every thought or answering every message or proving your worth. You can lay the day down even if it is incomplete. The mind will try to pick it back up because mind's like unfinished puzzles. But you can let the puzzle wait on the table until morning. Right now, you are allowed to be off duty, allowed to be imperfect, allowed to be unmeasured. As you listen to your own breathing, notice how the body already knows what to do. Inhale, and the chest rises. Exhale, and it softens. No performance required, no approval needed, just the quiet rhythm of being alive. Let the world outside your room keep moving without you for a while. Let the inner scoreboard dim. Let the lantern of attention rest on something simple, a slow breath, a calm darkness, a steady, ordinary safety. Good night.